Hi, my name is Zoe. I've been married for just over a year now. Since the beginning of my marriage, I've been putting in a lot of effort to get along with my mother-in-law and gain her approval. Unfortunately, all my hard work seems to have been wasted. She never seemed satisfied with me, no matter how much I tried. But recently, something happened that really broke my heart. One day, my mother-in-law came up to me and said something completely unexpected. She said, "I'm giving you back." Her words caught me off guard. "What do you mean by that?" I asked, feeling confused. I couldn't understand what she was talking about. But it didn't take long for her actions to make everything painfully clear. Without giving me any explanation, my mother-in-law decided to take me back to my parents' house. My parents live quite close to my in-laws, just a few minutes away by car. When we arrived at their house, she parked the car and yelled out the window in a loud, commanding voice, "Hey, come on out." I could hear the sound of footsteps inside the house, and soon enough, my dad came out. He looked surprised to see us standing there. "Oh, can I help you?" he asked politely. My mother-in-law didn't waste a second. "I need to talk to you," she said firmly. "Talk? Sure, let's go inside and discuss," my father replied, always the kind and welcoming host. But she wasn't interested in stepping inside. "No, we can talk right here," she said, shaking her head. "We're only here to give your useless daughter back to you." Her words hit me like a punch to the stomach. Useless. Is that how she saw me? I felt tears welling up in my eyes, but I stayed quiet. My father, on the other hand, was visibly upset. His kind expression turned serious, and he looked at my mother-in-law with disbelief. "What do you mean, useless?" he asked in a calm but firm voice, trying to understand. "I mean exactly what I said," my mother-in-law replied. "Isn't it obvious? Your daughter is a defective wife. She earns only $1,000 a month. How is that enough? She's practically worthless." She kept going on, saying harsh things about me without even thinking about how much it hurt. "She can't even do simple chores around the house. Honestly, what kind of wife is that?" My father's face turned red with anger. I knew he was holding back, but I could see the rage in his eyes. My mother-in-law didn't seem to notice his growing frustration. She just kept talking as if her words didn't matter. Finally, my father spoke. "So you want to return her to us?" he asked in a tense voice. "That's exactly what I'm saying," she answered, crossing her arms. "A wife like her is not fit to be part of my family. Parents should take responsibility for raising such a useless daughter." Hearing this, my mother, who had been inside, came out to see what was happening. She looked surprised at the scene unfolding in front of her, but my mother-in-law didn't even acknowledge her presence. She kept her attention on my father and repeated, "I'm returning her. You two should take her back and deal with her." My father took a deep breath, looked at my mother, and then nodded. "I understand," he said in a calm but serious tone. "If you want us to take responsibility, then we will." His words shocked everyone, especially my mother-in-law. "Wait, what?" she stammered. "What company are you talking about?" "What else could I mean?" my father replied. "If we are responsible for her, then we'll shut down the company." "What company? What are you saying?" my mother-in-law asked, clearly alarmed. But my father didn't explain further. Instead, he looked at my mother again, and they both agreed. "Yes, we will handle it and take responsibility," my mother said firmly. I stood there frozen, watching my father in disbelief. He was always someone who followed through on his words, no matter how difficult the situation was. When he made a decision, he saw it through to the end, especially when it came to me. I knew he would do anything for me, and this situation was no exception. My father loved me deeply, and it all started from my childhood. I was a very sickly child, often getting fevers or falling ill for days at a time. If anything stressful or difficult happened to me, I would become sick right away. Because of this, I missed a lot of school and rarely played with other kids. My mother was always by my side, taking care of me, and my father had to put his work on hold constantly because he was so worried about me. It wasn't easy for them, but they always made sure I felt loved and cared for. Even though being sick all the time was tough, it also had its perks. My parents spoiled me with books, video games, and other things to keep me entertained while I was stuck in bed. My older brother was always jealous of the attention I received, my father's love and support, but my parents couldn't help it. They loved me too much. Now, standing there in front of my in-laws, I realized just how much my father's love and protectiveness hadn't changed. No matter how hurtful the situation was, he was ready to stand up for me. But what would happen next? My father's serious tone worried me, and I couldn't stop wondering how this confrontation would end. As a child, I was especially fond of my laptop. It wasn't a brand new computer or anything fancy. It was actually my dad's old laptop that he used for work. Since it was secondhand, it might not have been powerful enough for most people to use every day, but for me, as an elementary school student, it was more than enough. I loved how I could draw pictures and play games on it. Most importantly, it let me connect to the internet and explore a world I didn't know existed. Being stuck in bed so often because of my health, the laptop became my escape. It felt like opening a door to a brand new universe. I could explore websites, look at pictures, and read about things I'd never seen before. For a child like me, who didn't get to go outside much, it was magical. I remember thinking, there's a whole world here I've never seen. Maybe I can create my own little world here. That thought stuck with me, and even now, it's one of my happiest memories from childhood. That's how I first got interested in computers. At first, I used it just to draw simple pictures like most kids do. But over time, my interest grew. I started learning about computer graphics and became fascinated by 3D designs. I wanted to know how people created these amazing images on their computers. That curiosity led me to study both illustration and computer graphics, and eventually I decided to become a graphic designer. Even though I'd always been physically weak, graphic design felt like something I could manage. After I finished high school, I started working from home as a freelance graphic designer. However, it wasn't easy at first. I didn't have a formal education in design. I was completely self-taught. That meant I didn't have the professional knowledge or connections that other designers had. On top of that, I didn't know how to find clients or get work. My health made commuting to a regular job impossible, so working remotely was my only option. But even then, I couldn't handle a strict 10 to 6 schedule like most people. I realized the only way to make this work was to find clients on my own and complete projects at my own pace. It sounded daunting, but I was determined to succeed. I spent countless days researching online, learning new skills, and figuring out how to market myself. I worked tirelessly, often late into the night, building my portfolio and reaching out to potential clients. Slowly but surely, my efforts started to pay off. People began to notice my work, and some even came back with new projects or recommended me to others. Over time, I started to get regular clients, and my freelance work began to feel more like a stable job. 5 years later, I was finally in a place where I could say I was successful. When I reached that point, it was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. One day, my dad approached me with a surprising question. "Do you want to create an ad for a construction company?" he asked. I was caught off guard. "An ad for who?" I asked, curious. For my company, he replied with a smile. My dad owns a small construction business that focuses on remodeling homes. It's a family-run company with just my dad, mom, and brother working there. Even though it's small, it's well known in our neighborhood. Are you sure you want me to do this? I mean, if it's a real job, I need to be paid, I said cautiously, wanting to make sure he wasn't just asking me as a favor. I'm not asking because you're my daughter, he said firmly. I'm asking because I think you have great taste and design, and I believe you can create something amazing. Hearing that from my dad meant the world to me. I felt proud and excited to be trusted with such an important task. I designed an insert ad for his company to be published in the local newspaper. I also created a website for the company and posted the ad there. It wasn't a big deal on a national scale, but in our local community, it made a difference. Soon, people started noticing my work. Some neighbors even told me, "I saw your ad. It looks great." Hearing those kinds of compliments made me so happy. My dad loved the ad so much that he turned it into a poster and displayed it at the company's entrance and on bulletin boards around the neighborhood. Seeing my work being appreciated gave me a sense of accomplishment. I had never felt more proud before. For the first time, I thought to myself, I can stand on my own 2 feet. I can live independently. As time passed, the posters became a bit of a local sensation. People started talking about them, saying things like, "The daughter of the construction company is a designer, and she even makes ads for the business." These comments filled me with pride and confidence. One day, an electrician from our town came to see my dad. He was a regular client of the construction company. "Your daughter is a designer, right? Do you think she could make some ads for my business too?" he asked. My dad, always light-hearted, smiled and said, "I'll ask so about it." This marked a turning point for me. Word was spreading, and more people in the community were starting to see me as a professional designer. It felt amazing to know that my hard work and determination were paying off. Even though I had faced so many challenges along the way, I realized that I could build a career for myself, even with all the odds stacked against me. My father's construction company often worked with a local electrical business whenever they needed help installing things like air conditioners, fiber optic cables, or electrical wiring. This town electrician was an important partner for my dad's remodeling projects. One day, my dad turned to me and asked, "So, can you make an advertisement for them?" I understood how important this partnership was for my father's company, so I happily agreed. After putting in a lot of effort, I completed the ad. It turned out even better than I had expected, and when my father delivered it to the electrician, they were thrilled. A few days later, I was surprised when someone came to my house to thank me personally. The person who showed up wasn't the electrician I knew, but a younger man who bowed politely and handed me a small gift wrapped in an elegant envelope. "I just wanted to thank you for the amazing job you did on the advertisement," he said warmly. Curious, I asked, "Who are you?" He smiled and introduced himself. "My name is Nicholas. My father is the electrician." It turned out Nicholas was the son of the electrician, and he was helping out with the family business after graduating from college. "So, are you planning to become an electrician someday?" I asked. He nodded. "Eventually, I'll take over the business." "That's great," I replied with a smile. "If that's the case, we might be working together for a long time." "Yes, I'd like that too," he said, then added with a playful smile, "especially since you're so attractive." I was stunned. Me attractive? I wasn't used to compliments like that, especially since I'd spent so much of my life sick and isolated. My face turned bright red, and I felt so shy I couldn't even look at him. In the end, we exchanged personal contact information, something I had never done before. That night, I was so nervous I couldn't sleep. From that day on, Nicholas and I stayed in touch. We would chat every day, sharing stories about work, hobbies, and our favorite things. Over time, these casual conversations brought us closer together, and eventually, we started dating. However, our relationship wasn't like most couples. Because of my health, I couldn't go on long dates or do many of the things regular couples enjoy. We could only visit the neighborhood park when I was feeling well enough to go out. Watching movies, going to restaurants, or taking trips together was simply out of the question. On top of that, our schedules didn't always match. Since I worked from home, I could adjust my time as needed, but Nicholas's job was different. Even on his days off, he often got urgent calls to repair appliances or help with installations. During summer and winter, he was especially busy installing air conditioners and handling other seasonal demands. Despite these challenges, we found ways to stay connected. We talked on the phone and sent messages every day, which became a comforting routine for both of us. Eventually, we got married. I moved into Nicholas's house, where I was warmly welcomed by his family. His parents already knew me well, and his mother was kind at first. "Don't worry too much about the housework," she said. "Just take care of what you can manage." His father was equally understanding. "When you have time, can you help make some traditional poppers for me?" he asked. "Of course, I'll handle it," I replied. At the beginning, I truly believed I was getting along well with my in-laws. But as time passed, things started to change. One day, my mother-in-law asked me, "Can you watch the store for me while I'm out of town?" "Sure," I said hesitantly, "but I have work to do as well." "Oh, that's fine," she replied casually. "You can bring your laptop and work from the counter." Reluctantly, I agreed. "Read if you don't mind. I'll take care of it." That was just the beginning. Over time, she began asking me to watch the store more and more frequently. It felt like every other day she needed me to cover for her. My father-in-law also started adding to the workload. One day, he said, "Can you create a website for the store?" "I'm not really an expert in web design," I replied honestly. "That's not my specialty." "It doesn't need to be fancy," he insisted. "Just something simple." With some hesitation, I agreed and put together a basic website for their electrical business. Despite my efforts, the requests from my in-laws didn't stop. Every time I completed one task, they found something else for me to do. "Can you help clean the house today?" my mother-in-law asked one morning. "But I have my own work to finish," I replied, trying to set boundaries. "Oh, it won't take long. Just clean the living room and kitchen," she said, brushing off my concern. Bit by bit, they kept piling on responsibilities, and it became harder for me to balance everything. I felt like no matter how much I tried to help, it was never enough. The kindness they had shown me in the beginning seemed to disappear, and I started to feel overwhelmed. "I don't understand what you're saying," I muttered as my mother-in-law scolded me. "You're the wife. Can't you at least handle that?" she snapped, her voice firm. "Yes, yes," I replied quickly, unable to argue. In the end, I gave in and did the cleaning she demanded. Once I started, there was no turning back. Cleaning turned into cooking, then laundry, and soon I found myself taking on more and more household chores. Before I knew it, I was also managing the store for my in-laws. The workload became so overwhelming that I couldn't keep up with my own graphic design projects. I had no choice but to cut back on my work, and naturally, my income started to decrease. Thankfully, since I was married, Nicholas took care of most of our expenses, so I wasn't too worried about the money. But the real problem wasn't financial. It was the growing pressure I felt from my in-laws. One day, I woke up feeling exhausted. "I think I have a fever," I told my mother-in-law, struggling to stay on my feet. "I'm really tired, and I'll need to rest for a while." Her reaction wasn't what I had hoped for. She frowned and said sharply, "I can't believe you'd get a fever from something like this." But then, as if remembering something, she added casually, "Oh, fine, just go lie down." With that, she walked away without another word. I felt guilty. Did I offend her? I wondered, regretting that I had spoken up. But my body wasn't cooperating with me, and I didn't have a choice. I collapsed onto the bed, my mind racing with worry. After some time, Nicholas came into the room. "Are you okay?" he asked, concern in his voice. "Yes," I replied softly. "I'm sorry. Don't push yourself too hard," he said, trying to comfort me. "I know, but your parents—" I trailed off, unsure how to explain. When I told Nicholas about everything his parents had been asking me to do, he gave me a puzzled look. "Why don't you just say no?" he asked, almost frustrated. "What do you mean?" I began, but he interrupted me. "You're an adult. You shouldn't please them. Tell them how you feel." His words stung. Nicholas didn't understand. If this were a regular job, I could definitely say no to unreasonable demands. But these weren't just anyone. They were my in-laws. If I refused, it could create tension in the family. What if they became upset and started causing problems in our marriage? My father-in-law might even tell Nicholas to divorce me. I knew I might be overthinking, but I couldn't help feeling trapped by these fears. What hurt the most was that Nicholas didn't seem to understand my situation. I felt completely alone in his family's house. Thinking about it, I couldn't hold back my tears and started crying quietly. "I have to stay strong," I told myself, trying to gather my courage. Once my fever went down, things returned to the way they were. My mother-in-law wasted no time asking me to run errands and do chores for her again. I reduced my own workload even further and tried my best to meet her demands, hoping to win her approval. I convinced myself that if I just worked harder, they might start appreciating me. But one day, everything took a strange turn. Out of nowhere, my mother-in-law asked, "So, how's your work going?" "It's going okay," I replied cautiously. "I'm managing little by little." "How much money are you earning now?" she pressed. I was taken aback. "That's none of your business, is it?" I replied, unable to hide my annoyance. "It is my business," she said with a sly smile. "Prices are going up these days. If you could give me some money for living expenses, it would really help her." The request caught me off guard. From what I could tell, the electrician business was doing well. With energy-efficient appliances becoming more popular, more people were asking for services like air conditioner installations. In fact, the business seemed to be thriving, with even major electronics retailers requesting their help. So why was she acting like they were struggling? Feeling uneasy, I decided to give her a small figure. "My income isn't much right now," I said carefully. "With all the housework I've been doing, I can only manage about $11,000 a month." "Only $11,000? She repeated, her voice rising in disbelief. "Yes, $11,000, I said firmly. "It's not bad for a part-time job, considering everything else I have to handle." Her face turned red with anger. "Only $11,000? And you don't even do much housework," she shouted. Her accusation stung. I wanted to argue back, but I held my tongue. How could she say that when I was the one doing most of the cooking, cleaning laundry, and even managing the store in her absence? Before I could respond, she suddenly stood up. "Wait here, I'm going to talk to your father." A few minutes later, she returned with my father-in-law. "Come with us," she said firmly. "Where?" I asked, confused. "To your parents' house," she replied. "My parents' house? Why?" I questioned, growing uneasy. "We're taking you back. "I'm returning you," she said coldly. I was stunned. Before I could fully process what was happening, they escorted me to my parents' house and left me there. I felt humiliated, hurt, and completely defeated. When we arrived at my parents' house, my mother-in-law stood in front of my father and said something shocking. "We're here to return your daughter," she announced with a smug expression. My father, calm but firm, simply responded, "If that's how it's going to be, I'll shut down my company." My mother-in-law raised her eyebrows, trying to make sure she understood him. "You're going to close your construction company? Is that what you mean?" she asked, her tone laced with disbelief. "Yes, there's no other company I'd be talking about," my father replied with a thin smile, completely unbothered. My father-in-law sighed deeply and joined the conversation. "So you're saying you'll shut down your construction company, even if it means harming our electrician business?" he asked, clearly frustrated. My father shrugged and said, "If it comes to that, I'll take responsibility for my daughter and do what's necessary." Seeing my father's determination, my father-in-law's face turned red with anger. "Fine, do whatever you want," he shouted, "but don't think you can drag us down with you." With those words, he stormed off, leaving my mother-in-law behind. She turned to me with a sneer. "You're a useless wife. Don't bother coming back," she spat before leaving as well. I stood there in shock, feeling utterly humiliated. "Is everything okay, so?" my father asked gently. I didn't know what to say. "Dad, what should I do?" I asked, feeling lost. He looked at me with sympathy and said, "Maybe it's time to consider a divorce." I nodded reluctantly. "Maybe you're right," I replied softly. Though deep down, I still hoped Nicholas would come for me and fight for our marriage. After all, the most important thing was that Nicholas loved me, even if his parents didn't. But Nicholas never came. Days turned into weeks, and I waited in vain. Finally, I received a message from him. It was only 3 words: "Let's get divorced." I wasn't ready to give up. I sent 2 messages hoping he would respond, but he didn't. Instead, I got a call from his lawyer. "Nicholas's parents have convinced him to proceed with the divorce," the lawyer explained. I felt like my heart had shattered. With no other options, I agreed to the divorce. I accepted the alimony and the terms Nicholas offered. And just like that, my marriage of less than a year came to an end. At the same time, my father followed through on his decision to shut down his construction company. But that wasn't the end of the business. My brother stepped in to take over. He kept the same name and location but cut all ties with Nicholas's family. Naturally, this hit Nicholas's parents hard. Their electrician business suffered because they lost the partnership with our construction company. Even worse for them, the news of my return spread like wildfire in the community. People began avoiding Nicholas's family, and many clients chose to work with my brother's new electrician partner instead. Over time, their business began to decline, and rumors spread that they were struggling to stay afloat. One day, my father smiled and said, "This will teach them a lesson." My mother and I agreed, but things took an unexpected turn the following summer. I was at my brother's construction company office when we got a phone call from a client. "The air conditioner you installed isn't working," the client said. When my brother went to check, he found that the outdoor unit had been deliberately damaged. "This is terrible, even for a prank," he muttered, concerned. He reported the incident to the police and replaced the damaged unit with the help of his electrician partner. But this wasn't an isolated incident. Similar cases kept happening. It was clear that someone was intentionally targeting my brother's business. The affected clients, desperate for help, reluctantly turned to Nicholas's family, who charged them premium prices for repairs. Nicholas's father, grinning smugly, told one client, "The demand is high, so we're raising our fees. Take it or leave it." It was infuriating, but there wasn't much we could do at the time. My brother, however, wasn't willing to let it go. "I'll find out who's behind this," he declared. With the help of several clients, he came up with a simple but effective plan. He provided free intercom systems with built-in security cameras to the affected homes. "Why intercoms?" I asked, puzzled. "These intercoms can record video and detect motion. They'll act as security cameras," he explained. I was skeptical but decided to trust his judgment. Within 3 days, the culprits were caught red-handed. To my shock, it was Nicholas's parents who had been sneaking into homes at night and damaging air conditioners. When the police questioned them, they confessed. They admitted they were trying to create more work for themselves because their business had been suffering ever since they lost clients. The news of their arrest spread quickly, marking the end of Nicholas's family business. With no clients left and a tarnished reputation, the company collapsed. I later heard from one of my brother's electricians that Nicholas had taken a job at a demolition site to make ends meet. I saw him working there, the electrician told me. I felt a small pang of sympathy for him, but I had no desire to get involved anymore. I had moved on with my life and was finally happy. I was working as a graphic designer and helping out at my brother's construction company. I could work at my own pace without the stress of overbearing in-laws. There was one small issue, though. My retired father was always around, constantly checking on me. "Are you tired? Are you okay?" he would ask every 5 minutes. One day, I teased him, "If you're so bored, why don't you get a job? I think it's cooler to have a working dad." To my surprise, he took my words seriously and started working again at my brother's construction company. It reminded me just how much he loved me. But I love my dad too, so I guess we're even.